how long can you be on dialysis before you can't be on dialysis anymore, and then will you get a match in that time?
Just to put it in perspective, you need to be at, I think it's 32 to 34 to be eligible for the liver transplant. 36, you're dead. My dad's been like 18. What are you like? That's like halfway there. It's been like 7 years. It's all a game. It's all a fucking game. Like, it's stupid.
We're not the doctors. We're not the government. What will we do? We have to listen to what they say.
So it's a waiting game, basically. And it's hard to really come to terms with that, where your entire life and your father's life basically revolve around the fact of, is someone's kidney going to be a match for them?
Someone has to live like that for years. It's not fair.
My father was just diagnosed with Parkinson's. We found out about 2 months ago. However, we believe that it was in him for maybe about 2 years, because we did notice some slowness in his movement. With Parkinson's, there isn't a reason, at least they have not found any reason of how you can get it, from my knowing. My father would sometimes have problems like getting up, like if he sat down. Now, it was very difficult for the last 2 years because we did not know that he had Parkinson's. So because he was not being treated for it, the symptoms were very bad up until a point where we had to see a neurologist. The doctor told me, he turned to me and he said, "Can I ask you something? What do you notice different about your father?" So I looked at my dad. I mean, my dad's my dad. I've seen him my whole life. I don't notice anything different about his face. Then he says, look at your dad. Look at his face." And I said, I don't see anything. His face is like a mask. There's no facial expression. And it was kind of, I could see where he was coming from, but I feel like I've seen that my entire life. Like, I know my dad's face. The face that this doctor is asking me to look at now is a face that I'm used to. So then the doctor said, he turns to my dad, he's like, "My friend, you have Parkinson's."
My father has end-stage liver disease. He's had it technically for, I've been told, almost ever since I was born. So about like 20 years or so. His symptoms have progressed recently, I mean, if you could even call it recently, to the point where he hasn't been able to like work or do anything. That's been about 7 or 8 years so far.
So my father had childhood diabetes that went undiagnosed until his late 20s. By that time, it had done so much damage, basically, to his organs, like his kidneys and his heart, because your blood sugar that goes, if it's not monitored correctly, it really does a lot of damage to your kidneys because your kidneys filter your blood. So by that time, in his late 20s, his kidneys had begun to kind of shut down. So by his early 30s, he was like hospitalized, and he almost died because his kidneys had basically shut down. It went from medication, and then it also declined kind of rapidly because medication can only do so much for so long. And then he had to be on kidney dialysis like 3 times a week, and he was put on the kidney transplant list.
As much as I wanted to break down, it was kind of like the moment where this is what it is, and I can't start crying now, because if I start crying, I don't know how my dad would react. Because my dad's in the early stages, we don't see much of a difference compared to the last 2 years, where we did notice small differences and then we dealt with it for over the years. So now seeing him, like, it's not much of a problem, except now that I know that he has Parkinson's, it does make a difference. I guess it's better to know that he has it than to guess what's wrong with him, because for the last 2 years, that's what happened. I wondered what was wrong with him, and now that I know, it's like, I guess it would make it easier for me, because because now I know that he's being treated for it. Although it's not curable, he is being treated. He's on medication. The doctor swears that he'll feel 100% better, compared to what he felt like before. And he does feel better. It's just that now, when I see him like a little shaking, I ask him, what's wrong? Are you okay? Like, I know, like now that I know that he has Parkinson's, I'm 100% more concerned. I ask him a lot more questions now than before when I didn't know what was wrong with him.
I mean, like, the bottom line is basically a lot of, like, alcohol and drug abuse. I mean, if you really just want to get technical with it, like, that's the bottom line. Like, obviously he had a pretty wild youth. At this point, he needs a liver transplant. The deterioration of his liver, it does all these other things to his body, which then, it's this progressive, it's supposed to be this just downward progression, basically until it gets bad enough where like, okay, yeah, now we'll give you a liver. Maybe I thought like, oh, like, everyone from that time period did these things, and it's this untold thing that your parents, did these things that might not have been, like, socially acceptable, like the drug abuse, the whatever, all those kind of things, the illegal activity. And it's weird when you think about it, like, oh, like my parents, whatever, did these things, the same things that they're telling me not to do. Did it change my opinion of them? I mean, no, just honestly, it just kind of put everything in a perspective, and not in a bad way. It just kind of like, it went from being like what this view of him was now to what the view of him is, if that makes sense.
Well, my father and my relationship it was a little different probably than how most kids are with their parents. My parents went through a really bad divorce when I was probably like 6. And I didn't see him for like 10 years, so I didn't see him again until I was like 16. And by that time, he was extremely sick. Like, he wasn't the person that I remembered when I was little. Coming from a 6-year-old who I had one picture of my father in my head to being reunited with him at 16, he was so sick and just aged so much because of everything that had happened. It was really hard to just kind of come to terms with not only have I not seen him in so long, but how much has changed in that amount of time. To a certain extent, I think just as human nature, you adapt. You become accustomed to how things become. But I think that when I would really think about it, and I would really start to think about the reality of his sickness and the reality of his situation, it didn't become easier. I think it may have become harder.
My initial thoughts, this is a terrible answer. I don't remember. I mean, I don't know if that says anything. It's been that long that I don't remember. It's been like 7 or 8 years. And I'm so used to it now. Like, I don't remember what it was like before. I vaguely remember just kind of like accepting it. Just like, okay, it's just something else that's happened. Like in the progression of things in my life, not that this is any relevance, but it's like, okay, like, parents split up, like happens to a lot of people, okay. And then like this kind of happens, it's kind of like, okay, it's just more things that are happening. The more time goes by, the more this becomes the normal. I mean, that's the ultimate reality of the situation. I mean, like, it's this thing like, oh yeah, eventually he'll get a transplant, and then at some point, maybe eventually things will get back to normal. But it's been so long, to me, it's just another year the same. It's just because this is becoming what is the normal in my mind. I can't think of a time where being normal is not this.
I mean, it is what it is. I've learned that, like, during the first couple of weeks that we found out. But like I said before, what I do is I keep in contact with him a lot. Like, I call him just to see if he's okay, or he'll call me. If I don't get a call from him, maybe I'll call him and say, hey, how's everything going? I'm constantly checking up on him. Like, did you take your medication? How are you feeling? Did you exercise? Because they say that you should do a lot of exercise when you have Parkinson's just to keep the body moving. But I don't really do it because I want to get over it. I don't do it to get my mind away from it. For me, it's like I want my mind to be there, because if I do try to get away from it, I'm scared that I get lost.
I think the best way to cope is to confront it, like the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of thing, at least for me. I think that the more you deny something, the harder it is, because you're constantly like putting up barriers. To deny something, you're constantly like making up reasons as to why it's not what it is. But if you just accept it, then you don't have to put so much energy into denying it.
I don't really do much to cope because this is just so normal for me now. It's not a problem. It sounds bad. I don't need anything to cope because there's nothing to cope with. Because like to me, this is the normal. Like if he was acting like, if he was like moving around, like being like back to what normal was, then I would be concerned because like, oh, this is like not what I'm used to. You get so used to something, you become like numb to it.
First, it was a discussion whether we should tell people or we shouldn't. And at first, there is the point where it's a medical issue and your medical business should be your personal business. You don't have to go out to the world and announce that you have something. However, it's something that's not going to leave. So it should not be hidden. So if the discussion does come up, I will mention that yes, my father has Parkinson's. However, I'm not gonna see a family member from like that I haven't seen in a very long time and start, crying and say, oh my God, my dad has Parkinson's. Like, it's not something that would happen. Like, we usually wait for someone to notice because it's very visible to see that he's moving slowly.
I can honestly say that I've grown to be open about my dad passing away. At first, I was very isolated. Like, when my dad first died, I basically locked myself away from the world and threw away the key. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't come out of my room. I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't know how to even express my own feelings and thoughts about it. It never goes away. Never goes away. It's never going to come back, but it becomes easier to deal with. In me being open about it, other people then feel comfortable maybe to come and talk to me about something that they may need help with.
Do I mind telling people? No. Will I go out of my way to say, oh yeah, my dad is sick? No. My problems are not your problems. Why am I gonna, me talking about it, me like harping over it? Like, I'm not looking for anyone's sympathy. Like, it's not gonna make me feel better for like someone to feel bad for me. Like, I don't, like, listen, like, it is what it is. The situation is the situation. And like, if you ask me about it, sure, I'll tell you. Am I gonna go out of my way and be like, oh hey, look, my dad is dying? No. No point. Everyone has their own problems going on. Nothing that anyone is going through makes them more special than the other person. I mean, this probably was the start of that, but through meeting other people with other problems, it kind of like drove this point home further. Like, I don't know what could be going on in your life. You don't know what could be going on in my life. So there should be this mutual understanding of respecting each other, but then at the same time being understanding of each other's problems.
Just be kind to people, because you don't know what their life consists of. Everyone has things going on in your life, and you always need to remember that, because how you treat someone can be the thing that puts them over the edge.
When my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I did view life a lot differently, because I was so used to the perfect life, and now that I can obviously see that there are imperfections, I just decided that this is the way it's going to be. So I started to get closer to my parents. There are things that we do now that we haven't done before, such as we never used to sit in the living room together and watch TV and have dinner, but now we find ourselves doing that. Every evening, all of us would be in the living room, we're watching TV, we're eating, so I definitely did get a lot closer to my parents, and I think that's also a part of growing up as a young adult, because I am that age where you do get closer to your parents, but I feel like knowing this now, it brought me even closer to them.
I mean, everything that's happened in your life contributes to the way you are as a person, either positively or negatively. I can't pinpoint the exact things on how it's changed me, but I know that the things that have happened to me and the things that I've seen, not that like I've seen these big, bad, scary things. Like I said, there are people who have seen and gone through much worse, but just the things that I've seen and the things that I've been experienced to at the young age and growing up have, by default, shaped who I am as a person.
I think that this definitely has changed me. I think that it makes me more aware of taking care of myself, so something like this doesn't happen to me. My dad died when he was 46, and I think that that's essentially way too young. By the time my father was my age, he was halfway done with his life.
The advice that I would give someone who is in the same or similar situation is to not give up. As heartbreaking as it might be, I would tell them that they just have to stay strong for that person and for themselves, because that is important. And although you may feel like things are going to end up for the worst, you have to make the best of what's happening now. Anyone can die from anything, so just don't fear death. I think that's the main reason why people go through depression when it comes to illness, because they fear death, they fear what's going to happen to them. Just keep living for the moment.
Tell them everything you want to tell them. Good, bad, just tell them. Do everything you want to do that you can do, because you're not going to get a second shot. I have a lot of things I wish I said, a lot of things. And I think that's the hardest thing to deal with, is everything you wish you said, good and bad, everything that you wish you did. It's hard not to do the what ifs, but I mean, it's unrealistic and it's not fair to you because you can't change it. So, to play the what if game, basically, you're like taunting yourself as to what may have happened. The scenarios that you play in your head and things like that, it's not fair to you and it's hurtful. Just get everything off your chest before it's too late.
The only thing I could think of that could possibly be somewhat decent advice that would actually make a person feel better is just knowing that there are other people in similar situations who have dealt with things, or people in different situations that have dealt with worse. Not that comparing it is a good thing, but just knowing that in some weird way you're not alone. I mean, it probably helps. I mean, I know it's a big deal, but just try not to let it get to you. You can't, if you let it get to you, it's going to derail your whole life. You just have to focus on doing the things to make things better. Either better for the whole situation, better for yourself, better for the person involved. And no matter how long it takes.